Rescue to Kill. Rescue to Kill is the sad story of a girl who was put in cage in the red light area due to some circumstance. She had an opportunity to escape into freedom, but that failed, and then someone came who was close enough to rescue her, but he did rescue, only to kill her as an honor killing. Her story has a common design shared by many other poor but pretty girls siphoned by flesh trade mafia into metropolitan jungle, countless birds trapped in red light cage. Samira was one such bird caged for last 5 years under the control of her Garwali, the owner of the brothel and pimp and broker, who is also a bouncer. She had passed through the usual chain of mishaps and misfortune, torture and anguish. She was of Nepali origin, very fair and attractive, with somewhat chinky eyes and mop of black curly hairs. She didn't dream of being a star or getting a fancy job in a big city. She was a simple home-loving girl in a family of low middle or even lower class. She was hardly out of school when this happened. She was kidnapped by broker and supplier of such pity poor girls in the flesh trade market, in which she was likely to fetch a good price. She had a brother who loved her and was proud of her qualities, valuing purity above everything. He was shaken when he found his dear sister kidnapped and lost, perhaps in the red light jungle, where it is very difficult to locate a lost girl and more difficult to rescue her from the sex worker network. She passed through many hands till finally she was sold to a good establishment with a rich mistress and good security of a bouncer cum broker. She had been broken and tamed like a wild horse by gang rape, and worse when she resisted to fall in line. She had to part with a major share of her earnings and leave of her upkeep and maintenance and service charges of the landlady and the broker. In time she became reasonably rich and famous due to her seductive face and figure with singing and dancing skill. She used her seductive body and magnetic sex to earn enough and contribute to the landlady the price she had paid for Simran alias Smita Chitri alias Simi. Within 4 to 5 years the landlady Savitri had earned good money out of this girl, though she was not ready to release her, using the devious economy and accounting of a brothel, charging excessive interest, upkeep and brokerage. It was advanced arithmetic used for a bonded labor or sex worker, in rural and urban setting. In case of a bonded labor in rural area, the loan remains constant and the worker and his family had to work through several generations to pay for the interest and their maintenance. She was carrying on the daily fire walk and suffocating red cage as a bounded sex worker. She saw a ray of light through her dark cage. A man, Dr. Subhash Chandra, a sophisticated and sensitive owner of industry, became her client. He was an unwilling visitor who came under a pressure of his friend, who persuaded him to try and test Sima just for once as an experiment. When he came to visit her, it was love at first sight. Though she was a professional and he was a rich eligible bachelor coming from an orthodox family. He was the only child of his industrialist father and was a bright young man of 30 who had completed his engineering and management studies with a PhD from an American university. When he came back to India, his parents were eager to get him married, but he was reluctant. His father wanted to hand over his business to Subhas and himself retire into religious and political pursuits. When he took over, he closed the unit manufacturing alcohol of a cheap variety, having a large market in rural and poor quarters. Instead, he started making generic medicines available at cheaper rate than the branded ones. All in all, Subhas was an excellent person of head and heart, except that he was not interested in women. His friends who wanted to corrupt him by linking him with girls either for love or sex. His mother Renuka Devi, a Puritan and sanctimonious character, loved her only son Subhash and wanted to get him married with a girl from a high and rich family, matching the family status. On persistent persuasion of his friend Nirmal, Shubhas did agree to pay a visit and witness her mutra, a song dance routine supposed to entertain and seduce the customers. He sat in the front row of special group of client. He was indifferent to the whole show. But as the mutra advanced with special attention and provocation directed to Subhas, he was forced to take notice. When she bent down to look into his eyes at a distance of a few inches, he fell in love with her, a love at first sight. This love was beyond the attitude of a customer who could buy the favor of the girl by shelling out sufficient cash which he could easily afford, and Simi went beyond the attitude of luring a customer for extra profit. He was under hypnosis of the spell cast by her singing and dancing and her ravishing beauty and seductive manner, but the magnetism on both sides was socked in love. Shubhas could hardly sleep that night, and when he slept, Simi saturated his dreams. Next day, without telling his friend and cancelling his afternoon appointments in office, he visited Simi again. The mistress, the elderly lady Savitri, told him, "This is not the time for mutra and you should come only in the late evening. Simi is taking rest and preparing for the night session." But Shubhas insisted and handed over a wad of cash. He was allowed to enter the bedroom of Simi. She was surprised yet happy to see Shubhas at this odd hour. She was in her translucent gown. She received the special guest with a warm smile and a light hug. She knew that Shubhas must have greased the palm of the madam very well to be allowed to enter Simi's bedroom at this hour. When it was time to rest and prepare for hectic night shift in or out of bed. In this meeting Simi could sense the intensity and authenticity of love for each other, beyond mere erotic flavor. They didn't have much conversation, but they looked into each other's eye and then hastily parted with a goodbye with a fluttering kiss. Simi's love was also genuine and with matching intensity. She had retained much of her innocence and susceptibility to love, totally different from what her profession warranted. She was allowed by Savitri at a good price to be taken by Shubhas for dinner and even outings. Their love grew and matured into commitment. Savitri was a barrier which Shubhas could easily cross with his cash, but then a bigger barrier reared its head. He decided to marry her and took this decision to his parents for approval, which he was sure to get. His father, though reluctant, didn't oppose strongly, but his mother Renuka Devi was aghast. How could he, the scion of a rich and respectable family, could descend to the level of the girl in muddy profession? She was furious and won't relent in spite of Shubhas begging and cajoling her. He said, he was deeply in love and committed. And he can't think of changing his decision and jilting Simi. He even said that if his mother didn't approve, he will marry her without Simi her approval. And, he was ready to be turned out if his mother didn't allow Simi to enter in the family fold. There was a bitter and agonizing spell in which Shubhas, Simi, and Renuka Devi were trapped. It was a painful dilemma for Shubhas as he loved his mother very much. And yet, he was equally committed in love with Simi. When Simi came to sense his dilemma, she even suggested that she was ready to walk of the circle of Shubhas, though it will be severe heartbreak. After a week a solution and strategy materialized in her mind. A few days before the marriage was to be registered in court, Renuka Devi confronted Simi in privacy. She could access her by bribing Madame Savitri. Simi was surprised with a dash of fear. The scene which followed was to break her heart and plunge her in irreversible sorrow and sense of loss of her love. Without any preface, Renuka Devi spouted her acidic vitriol on Simi. "I know you have won my son's heart by your cunning, greed and seductive skill. But this marriage can never materialize. You can't enter my family as a daughter-in-law. There is unbridgeable gap in status and respectability between you and us. You must leave my son alone. If you still insist on marrying my son, go ahead and marry. But it will only be over my dead body." Saying thus, Renuka Devi took out a handful of toxic pill and was about to gulp when Simi pulled her hand away and the pills were scattered on the floor. Simi said with tears of unbelievable agony, "I can't marry crossing the dead body of his beloved mother. I surrender and withdraw, and I promise you that I will dissuade your son away from me. And, I will walk out of the circle of his love with my bleeding heart." Renuka Devi was touched and yet happy with the success of her strategy. She took Simi in her arms and said, "I will forever be grateful to you. I request you not to disclose this meeting to Shubhas and repel Shubhas away from the bond of your love. Unless he hates you, he won't stop loving you." The scene, though melodramatic and filmy, was a real one, life sometimes stranger and more filmy than a film and fiction. She was successful in pushing out Shubhas from the circle of her love. She said, "Thank you for the time we have spent together, but on my part it was mere pretense and acting. I didn't love you, though I wanted to trap you and your riches. You know, a girl in my profession can do an expert job of ensnaring an innocent bird like you. It was all pretense and deception. Never come back to me and show your face. I hate you." She pushed him out of her room and banged the door shut on his face. 2 hearts and 2 lives were shattered by this event. In case of Shubhas, his shock was tinged with anger against Simi, who had played with her emotion, his heart and body. He vowed a vengeance in the form of getting married quickly, a girl, a bride of his mother's choice, and invite Simi on the occasion. In case of Simi, she passed through tears and sobs for several days and nights, locking herself up in her room. But she was happy that she had succeeded in dissuading and repelling her love, and she was relieved when the marriage of Subhas was conducted. She had prevented tragedy of his mother's possible suicide, though it was at the cost of her own heartbreak. Subhash got busy in his work and his marital life. He plunged himself in the lifestyle of a rich industrialist, trying to forget Simi and the wound given by her. Simi for some time lived a sad and broken life, unable to perform with charm her professional routine, singing, dancing and selling herself in bed. The lady manager, Savitri, was not happy with the reduced earnings of her golden bird, but she consoled herself with her extra earnings due to the generosity of Subhas, who had bribed her liberally. After a couple of months, a young boy of 20, Rakesh Jain, still in college, started visiting her, offering good price. He was captivated by her charm, her seductive manner with a streak of sadness. Simi was now a changed person, trying to nurse her heartbreak. She treated Rakesh with the tenderness of an elder sister, dissuading him not to visit her in this muddy abode. She didn't want him to taint his character by visiting a prostitute in a brothel. He came from a rich and respectable background, but he persisted in his visits as he felt he was in love. It was a mix of infatuation and tender bond, tinged possibly with love. Rakesh stopped visiting her for some time, as his parents had come to know of his affair and kept a strict vigil on him. Though Rakesh couldn't visit her physically, but Simi came in his dreams, and he kept a distant watch, following her movements secretly and discreetly. Simi, however, was in deep suffering, forced to work in her profession with a bleeding heart, having lost Subhas. She felt she was lost in life. Then a bright ray of hope with possibility of rescue entered her life. There was no question of her flying out of cage, into freedom, as she didn't have enough money, as per Savitri's account, to pay for freedom. Once a client came with a fine bearded face, and when he came into Simi's bedroom after paying the price to Savitri, he peeled off his beard and makeup. He was Simi's elder brother. He had come to rescue her. Simi was his favorite sister, whom he had often promised in Rakshabandhan, tying of a thread on a brother's wrist as a security ring, to love and protect her throughout life. He had somehow located her and come to rescue from the hellhole, as Simi thought. He was at once happy and disturbed in his meeting, happy to locate his dear sister and disturbed to find her sunk in a sinful, muddy cesspool. They had long conversation, exchanging their life and emotion. He planned an escape and rescue for Simi. But it was not easy, as the security of the bouncer was cruel and tight. Several days passed, and finally his brother Suresh was able to execute his plan. He stole his sister right under the nose of her owner Savitri. In the early hours of the morning before sunrise they escaped, when Savitri and the bouncer were snoring in sleep. They went to a flat in a respectable society. Suresh told Simi to rest in the afternoon after eating and drinking a beverage, a mango milkshake. Suresh left, saying that he will buy a ticket for both to go back home. Simi was excited with her freedom after 5 years of bondage, ready to go home. Rakesh made a sudden appearance while Simi was dozing off after her lunch, as she was to pick the glass of milkshake to drink. Rakesh snatched the glass, spilling the milkshake on the floor. A cat was lying still as dead in a corner. She had licked the milkshake while Simi was dozing. The milkshake was poisoned. It was a part of the strategy of her brother to execute honor killing of his dear sister Simi for her sin of being in the dishonorable and despicable profession of prostitution. Rakesh told a shocked and safe Simi, "I have been tracking you ever since I stopped visiting you. I loved you and love you still. I could smell a rat when I saw your brother going to station to buy only one ticket for himself. I came back to you hurriedly to tell you this. I found the cat unconscious in a corner after licking the milkshake. I knew it was poisoned and I stopped you from taking a gulp of poison." Rakesh took her in his arms and was about to leave the flat under cover of darkness when Suresh encountered them. There was some fight and Rakesh was able to escape with Simi, now safe from the tragedy of honor killing by her own dear brother Suresh, who had rescued her only to kill. She was safe in the loving arms of her lover, Rakesh.